What's going on, everybody? My name is Kenta Goba.
And I'm Philip Kwan.
I'm excited to announce our very first guest to the show. He's a serial entrepreneur who's founded companies such as Monda Naturals, Social Supply Co., and currently the CEO of Our Breath Collective. He's a breathwork practitioner who studied under Wim Hof, Dan Brule, Casper Vandermeulen, Peter Litchfield, Brian McKenzie. He's a surfer, a family man, a father of two, and I'm honored to call him my friend, Reis Paluso. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, dude. We've known each other for a bit of time, but for those who don't know you and who are watching, can you sort of maybe tell us your first experience with breathwork as a practice and how you got into it in the first place?
Yeah, my first experience was actually with my current business partner, one of my best friends, Luke Winson.
Okay.
I, like many people, was just dealing with a lot of stress and things in life that just kind of like started building, obviously having businesses and kids and looking for some sort of relief for myself. And I actually heard Wim Hof on a podcast and thought, this guy's got something going on and I need to like explore it.
Yeah.
It definitely like caught my interest. And I went home and I told my wife about it, and she was like, oh, you should talk to Luke. I was just talking to him the other day, coincidentally, about Wim Hof. He mentioned it to me that he was doing it. And I was like, okay. And he and I weren't really super close at the time. My wife knew him through a yoga teacher training that she led and he was a part of. And but I just reached out to him and he said to me, oh, are you ready for a life upgrade? When someone says that to you, like, well, how do you say no?
Right.
So he came over and we did some breath work in my bedroom, and that was it. I was hooked. I went to some place I had never been under my own control and felt just super uplifted and, energetic and just all the things.
Yeah.
And that was it. I was hooked and I just kept going from there.
So Luke introduced you to breathwork initially.
Yeah.
Did you have any experience before that, maybe like as a child, or any times that you kind of recall that maybe that played a part, and maybe it was like something you didn't realize until like later on you look back and you go, maybe you had moments of when you were a kid, like?
Nothing in particular that really stood out that like I drew a connection to. I grew up playing sports, and obviously when you're moving your body, your breath is impacted. But nothing that really like kind of connected the dots there.
Okay.
It was more just like the feeling of like elation and energy and feeling high, more or less. Which, that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
100%. So then how did that, like from that point, and that led you to eventually like meeting Wim Hof and studying under him, right? So how did that?
Yeah, so from Luke, he was like, oh yeah, like here's the Wim Hof 10-week course. There was a 10-week original course. He gave me his login and I did it in like 10 days. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. And like, what else is there? And fortunate for me, I had him as sort of like just someone else to give me a different perspective. And he had a deep yoga background, pranayama background, and he was also a rebirther, which is another methodology of breathwork.
Interesting.
And so I had him to sort of like open the lens of like, hey, there's more to breathwork than just Wim Hof breathing. And we got super excited about it together because, here's me coming along with fresh eyes and like super excited about it. So we started looking for classes that were around, and there really weren't that many, but it started that way. And my kind of like tendency was to go towards the Wim Hof method because that was what like I was introduced to. So I ended up going on a retreat, one of the Poland retreats with Casper.
Cool.
I didn't actually meet Wim until I decided to do the teacher training course, which I never had any intention of. It was more just like, hey, this is a personal exploration. I'm just going to heal myself, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think naturally that's how these things go. And you want to, you like figure out something that really works for you, and you
Right.
just want to pay it forward and share it to other people. And so,
Right.
you know, after going to Poland, I was like, okay, like this is amazing. I've had crazy experiences that I never thought were possible, hiking mountains in my shorts, and all the things that kind of went down there. And I came home, I was like, I'm going to do the teacher training. Why not? You know? And so that kind of led me through the path, and that's where I actually got to meet Wim and
So cool.
spend a little time with him, and then, you know, was certified as a Wim Hof instructor,
Right.
and then just kept going from there. And that was kind of the same story as far as like having a different perspective to open the lens of there's not just one way to do this.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
I think our tendency is we find something that really works for us, and we just stay on that track,
Right.
and then we get the blinders on, and we don't really see like all the possibilities for where this can go. And
Right.
I was lucky to have influences that kind of steered me towards a broader perspective, which I think is ultimately the best perspective. Not just getting into one lane and staying in that and trying to prescribe that to everyone. We're all so individualized, you know, bio-individual, and we all have different life experiences that one thing that might work really well for me is going to be totally different for you. So
Right.
want to be able to like adapt and be more goal oriented and more individualized in my approach anyway.
Yeah. Interesting. So when it comes to like, you know, going to get certified as a Wim Hof instructor or along that path, was there a moment when you realized that this is something that you want to share with others? Like when was that moment? Because, you know, obviously now that you're helping others do, you know, discover the breathwork for themselves, you know?
Yeah, it was pretty immediate. I went to Poland. I met a couple of the first group of certified Wim Hof instructors in the U.S.
Okay.
One of the guys, his name was Ben, and I came home and I was like so fired up. I bought a chest freezer, made my ice bath in the backyard, started like telling everyone, like, you know, I was just like, you guys got to do this, and, and everyone's like, Wim Hof, what's that, you know?
Right.
So Ben actually ended up, he was in LA shortly thereafter, the Poland retreat. So I was like, dude, come down. I'll bring people together. We can have a workshop. And right around that time was kind of where I decided like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And I don't really have like any plan for it or anything, but you know, then having him come and expose a bunch of people to it, and with the science and all the things that you teach in the, you know, like a Wim Hof workshop.
Right.
And that kind of just like opened my eyes, was like, oh wow, like there's a whole thing here that no one's like teaching. And even then I was just like, I just want to get it for my own knowledge, you know? And then, you know, a little community just started to grow. I started having sessions at my house. It started with Luke and I in my kid's bedroom, and then it turned into 4 people on the weekend, and then it turned into like 8 people, and then, you know, it just started to grow where it was like my garage was filled on Sundays. We started calling it Ice Church, and had a long run of that where it was just like bring friends together. We'd do breath work in the garage, go outside, get in the ice bath, drink tea together, do like a little gratitude circle, and it was so like literally every weekend for a few years.
Wow.
Basically until COVID. And so that was like kind of the organic community that grew. And then once I got certified, then I started teaching workshops at a local studio, and that kind of then fed into the Ice Church group. And so it was like this whole thing that just unfolded, like no intention of it.
Right.
I didn't plan to be a teacher. It wasn't something that I was like going to push my life towards. I had a marketing agency. I had the sunscreen brand, and I was highly focused on that. And this just kind of like came up and was like, okay, this is a cool thing that makes me feel good because I'm helping other people. I also had a bit of like this push-pull thing with my agency. It was like focused on social media, feeding the beast, keeping people attached, selling products that maybe I didn't necessarily believe in. It was definitely like a internal battle for myself. And then I, you know, was able to kind of bring the breath to help people regulate, you know? And so it was always this like oil and water situation for me. So yeah, never had like any intentions out of the gate of being a teacher. It was more just like, hey, this is good for me and I want to keep going, and then if I can just pass it along to friends, that's rad too. And it was a pretty special time. Yeah, it had a lot of like people coming to my house and
Yeah.
all just like building this like little connection around breathing, and it was super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned something about the science behind the breathing. I do want to touch on that because I feel that people who don't know a lot about breath work see it as kind of this fringe, uh, maybe woo. There's a little bit of that woo-woo attached to it. Um, that's not my perspective on it at all, but that the science that's coming out behind it to back it, and the studies that Wim Hof has done, it's it's groundbreaking. It's still very fresh. People are still figuring it all out, but I think that's a great catalyst for introducing new people into it who are not so maybe I want to say maybe more Western minded, but maybe not. That's not the right term. I want to say, yeah, just people who are just want the practicality of it and not the spiritual aspect of it.
Yeah, and it absolutely bridges the two. You can have these deep cosmic psychedelic experiences with it, and that's sort of one kind of realm of breath work. And then there's kind of more of like the functional style of breathing, which is really like looking at your mechanics and how you're actually engaging the breath and the breath more as a behavior. So it's kind of like these two different realms that kind of work together, come together, and there is absolutely like a very woo side of it, like it's explainable, but it's also not explainable, right? Like the experiences that you have are just, you can't really describe it. But then you look at the science and we can understand our physiology. We know about our physiology. We can understand the chemistry and the exchange that's happening there, and the way we can manipulate our chemistry to have other impacts on our physiology. And then we can also look at our nervous system and how the breath is directly correlated to our nervous system. So I think that the fact that there is this scientific side of things, it's allows it to kind of reach a wider audience, because people can connect to that. It's not this like skepticism. There is a lot of skepticism, and then you can actually bring the science in and be like, no, look, this is actually what's happening. This is how we can impact and change our physiology, our nervous system in real time under our own control. And so I think that sort of opens people's eyes a little bit. Some people, they totally glaze over and they're like, I don't care about the science, I just want to feel good.
Right.
Or they're really interested in the spiritual side of things. So it kind of hits on all the different things. And I think that as a facilitator and teacher, part of it is understanding like all the realms so that you can speak to as many people as you can based on where their interest lies. But yeah, I think the science is a big part of like what really connected me, particularly to the Wim Hof method. None of the other methodologies at the time were really focused on bringing the science in. And I think Wim, that was a big part of like what allowed him to kind of have the success that he did. Was otherwise he would just be some crazy dude doing wild things and being super loud and rambunctious, and as he is. And the science actually allowed him to ground into the fact that like, yeah, these things are happening. We're able to really understand it on a deeper level. Right. And so that kind of really drew me in. I wasn't never big into science, but for whatever reason, it allowed me to draw this like connection between the experience physically, like what I was actually experiencing there, and then okay, I could see it on a image or a graph or a chart.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. And then it almost like allows you to connect with it even more. You can feel it. It's like see it, think it, feel it. So I really liked that and have continued to really focus on the science, and it is a really exciting time. Breathwork it's sort of like I always say, it's like where yoga was 20 years ago. It's definitely fringe. But it's the acceleration of which is going to it already is blowing yoga out of the water, because we all are breathing. We all can do it. We don't need to go anywhere. We don't need an outfit. We don't need to like have a mat or anything. It's like literally you can just sit here like we did before we started and focus on your breath, and that inherently is going to have some sort of change, some sort of impact. And I mean, just looking at where we're at culturally, there's a lot of stress in our lives, 100%. And more every day, and so people need tools to be able to work through that, and our breath is the easiest, most accessible tool for that. I'm not going to say it's a cure-all. I think if anyone tells you it's a cure-all, like, run the other way, but it can certainly help with a lot of things. And I think for a lot of people like myself, it was sort of like a catalyst, or it was like the opening of the door for more self like reflection, more figuring out like where, going into the shadow and all of those things, self-improvement. It was definitely like opened a big door for me that, has continued to open in ways that I never thought were even accessible or that I even knew were there. So I think that is the beauty of it. It's like we're all doing it, and we just need to like kind of relearn how to tap in and utilize it to our advantage.
That's awesome. Yeah, you have been doing, or at least in the maybe past few years, you've been doing some retreats. Is that correct?
Yep.
Cool. And so I guess I've thought about the retreats in general, and because there's other people offering retreats as well for like breath work and cold exposure and that type of thing. But when it comes to like the ones that you're conducting, do you have a like specific type of niche of individuals that you sort of kind of navigate to, or like magnetize to, that you want to join? Or is it like kind of anyone can come and join, and it's like, I guess like my question is like around like if you have specific for like sports athletes, or you have specific for a different type of like someone that's not as athletic, or something that's not performance, they're just like an everyday person.
Yeah, we so far the retreats have just been like kind of more generalized.
Okay.
Definitely we've had some athletes, professional athletes come through them, but I think that is one interesting thing, is that just because you're a professional athlete doesn't mean you're a better breather.
Right.
Actually, there's a lot of the athletes that I worked with, there's a lot of mechanical things that are happening that they're totally unaware of, that are impacting their performance just the same as me or you, like an kind of average person, normal person, because we've never had anyone sort of guide us down the path of really understanding how we're breathing.
Right.
So the retreats have been more like generalized. They're not going after any sort of niche. It's more just like, hey, here's a community to come and be a part of, and a safe and kind of tightly held container for you to like get a little bit messy, because that's what happens when you start breathing. And in particular, when you do it in a group, you have this like co-regulation happening, and everything kind of like gets a little bit more elevated, a little more escalated. And so you can go into some really deep places, and it's important to be in a container that's held by facilitators who like are like remove the ego from it, like that's 100%. Definitely happens. Like we see it all the time with these like guru type people. More and more we see like people taking advantage of people, because you're going into a really vulnerable space. And so part of what we've been doing is just like trying to create the container for people to come and learn a little bit more about themselves, connect to other people, and I think that's really actually what's really beautiful, is you go for you, but then you also are there for everyone else, because you start sharing your experience, and then that like kind of brings things up for other people, like if you've ever been in any type of experience like that, where there's like a sharing, circle, and it's like you start hearing yourself and everyone else. And so it's like this sort of group dynamic of healing that starts happening. And then, I mean, gosh, I've had people come to retreats and now they're like best friends, that type of thing. That's so cool. It's pretty special. And we it's kind of like we go in with I always say it's like the no plan. Like we have a general idea of what we're going to do, but then also like got to be totally unattached to where it might take
Right.
you. You know, depending on what the activities that you're doing or what comes up for people. And so, yeah, they're pretty free flowing and super fun. Yeah, I love the retreats. They're always a really good just way to kind of bring it all together and give someone like a really high impact experience in a short amount of time.
That's awesome.
How long are the retreats?
We've anywhere from 1 day to a week long we've done. So yeah, like a little mini retreat would be like a day long, or then we do like weekend, Friday through Sunday, and then we've done some weekend or then week long retreats. So just depends. Yeah, I don't really have any on the books for this year, unfortunately. Kind of just like trying to focus on other things, but it's also really hard to find a retreat center.
Oh, okay.
That can house enough people and that's affordable for the end user. So yeah.
So I guess I was also thinking about, like, kind of referring back to the last question, when I'm thinking about like a professional athlete, or like maybe someone that has like a mental health condition, you know, like PTSD, depression, anxiety, that type of thing. Can breathwork be like specialized for a certain individual, to like a certain type of breath work for an individual, and like what does that look like?
Yeah, like I said before, it's highly individualized, or it can be.
Okay.
So based on what someone is dealing with, or what their goals are, you can certainly be very intentional with how you're utilizing it. One of my kind of like main guiding principles is minimum effective dose. So rather than like putting someone in the slingshot and blasting them off to outer space, someone who maybe has some, you know, PTSD or some sort of trauma, like that can be adding to the trauma, or it can like re-trigger the trauma. So, you know, it's like how little bits over a long period of time, this idea of titration, and then not necessarily having to like do the whole like go shoot for the moon out of the gate, you know. And so yeah, it can be very individualized. You know, an athlete who's looking to build, you know, performance, certainly a lot of things you can do in that realm. Someone who's dealing with you know, stress and anxiety or depression, there's you know, a different kind of angle, route, approach that you would take with that, and you know, everything in between. So it's really, I think that's where it comes into play, is like understanding the principles of all these different parts of ourselves, the physiology, the psychology, the nervous system, all that. And then it's almost like you're sort of like a little bit of an investigator of like trying to understand who you're working with and what they're dealing with, and looking at their past and how that might have led them to where they are now, and how that has potentially created dysfunctional habits in their breathing, and then understanding what the symptoms they might have and how that might be related to breathing.
Right.
So it's interconnected to all that. But like I said, it's not a cure-all. So you could get to a certain place where maybe you need some assistance, you know, another outside intervention, someone else to kind of come in and help on a certain thing that is out of my wheelhouse. You know?
Right.
Because it certainly happens, you know. We start getting into these like very intimate places that things start getting triggered and come up, and it's like, I'm not a therapist, like I don't have the expertise to handle that, but you know, I have resources that I kind of refer out to when I need it. But yeah, it's very adaptable.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that there's a lot of common themes that happen with people, and my approach is generally like, I kind of know, okay, I'm going to start here and see where that goes, and generally it leads to here, and it's just the pace at which you can move is a lot different. An athlete who is super in tune with their body and a little bit more willing or used to this type of stress that you can put someone under, you can move a little bit quicker than someone who's maybe in more of like a in a trauma loop or like a PTSD, like you
Right.
gotta like just tiny little bits at a time, you know, because a lot of times when people are in that like trauma state or like a freeze state, they're totally disconnected, they're totally disassociated from their body. So it's actually like getting them to like come back to their body a little bit, so that they can start to feel and understand, oh yeah, like I'm actually feeling this. Like some people don't even know what they're feeling,
Right.
you know, or where that is showing up in their body,
Right.
you know. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting process. That's one thing that I love about it. It's like it's a little bit of a puzzle, and you don't really know what's going to happen, and you just have to be kind of adaptable and on your toes, and you have to be very in tune, you know. Like that is always a challenge for me, is like staying super present and like really being the observer and watching and knowing when to do things and the questions to ask and that sort of thing. I mean, I'm constantly learning in that realm. So
what are like some of like the basic like health benefits or, you know, psychological benefits from a breathwork practice in your eyes?
Yeah, I think that, you know, number one is just energy.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we can really tune into whether we need more energy or whether we need to like slow things down.
Right.
So, you know, based on like our nervous system, right? Sympathetic, we can kind of build a little bit more arousal, or we can reduce arousal.
Okay.
I think that is number one.
Reis, what are some of the general health benefits, you know, from a physical, spiritual, or physiological standpoint, just in general, like with breathwork?
There's a lot. So I think energy, you know, and management of our energy. So we can increase arousal, we can decrease arousal. So that upregulation, downregulation, I think that's a skill that most people don't recognize they could utilize, particularly the downregulation side. We're usually running pretty hot. We've got a lot of stimulus and input that's coming in, and we don't actually take enough time to kind of bring things down and be more into that like recovery, rest and digest state. I would also say a big one is just like presence, right? Our breath it brings us back to the present moment. When we just put our attention on our breath, it just brings us back here, brings us back home into our body, and it gives us an opportunity to kind of slow down, to maybe even just like creates a quick pause so that you're not like necessarily reacting. You can respond a little bit more consciously. I think one of the primary things that I always tell people when I start working with them is my goal is to build awareness, and particularly around your breath. So at any point in your day, when you start to do something, you become more aware of your breath. It's like, oh wow, I was just holding my breath, or wow, I'm like really starting to get activated and my breath is changing. It's like I'm breathing up in my chest, in my, you know, shoulders. And so once you build awareness, then you actually have the ability to make a choice. You're not allowing, you know, sort of the programming to take over, you know, you kind of like insert yourself. So to me, that's a big one, is just the awareness. I mean, obviously we have a lot of physical performance, mental cognition, focus, all those things we can bring more into play when we start to breathe consciously, or through a breath practice. I would say also like just resiliency and capacity. Like I lead morning breathes on my platform, and that's kind of like the number one thing that everyone says is like, when I do my breath practice in the morning, I just feel like there's more space for me to like kind of move and operate. And the things that like come at me, I just, it's almost like there's just more room to move. So yeah, I mean, there's also like, think about like, as you're breathing properly, you're activating your diaphragm. That's moving all your like organs, lower organs. So gut health, organ health in general, cardiovascular health, you know, really getting our vasculature to open and close properly. cardiovascular disease being the number one killer in America. Like if we have a strong cardiovascular system, we're going to be in a good place. The list goes on. Really, the breath impacts every system in the body. So our immune system improved.
I was wondering, as you were saying that, I was thinking, like when you have like a specific thing, like you were saying, the sympathetic nervous system, like it's like it brings you energy, or your parasympathetic, like kind of calming you down. And you can look at breath work as like a tool, right? So there's different types of breath work. Do you have specific breath work that you do throughout the day to address specific things? Like, like today, like, you're dealing with someone that stressed you out, or you have to get in the zone. Like, what are the differences of the type of breath work you're doing?
There's definitely like protocols or techniques to drive you in whatever direction of the goal that you have is. I would say that there are certain things that maybe can be generalized for everyone, but again, it's individualized. So something that like works for me might be different for you. Like, for example, 4-7-8. That's a very common breathwork protocol designed for sleep.
Oh, for sleep. Okay.
Yeah, Andrew Weil created it or coined it, and so it's an inhale for 4 seconds, hold on the top for 7 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds.
Okay.
For me, doesn't really work for sleep.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But for other people, they can do 3 breaths like that and they're out.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's a little bit like everyone's a little bit different for whatever reason. It's just it's cool. Never been that for me, and I have other strategies for that. So again, there are certain protocols that we can say like, this is going to do this. Yeah. But it might not work for you. There might be a better strategy for you.
So you're there to sort of help guide people to find those strategies for themselves? Okay.
Yeah, ultimately, I want to empower someone to understand all these different parts, and then coming up with, okay, what's going to work for you at this time. And it takes some experimentation, which in of itself is a challenge for a lot of people. We want the way, give me the way, give me the pill.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, to me, it's like, okay, opening up this idea of play more, like, let's just play with it and see what happens. And, you try this for a few days and report back, and then we'll kind of iterate on that if it's not working. Also, our bodies are really intelligent and we adapt quickly. So something that might work really well in the beginning might end up changing over time. That's very commonly reported, is particularly like these like bigger type of longer breathing sessions, where you have a lot of things happening. You feel like all these different sensations in your body, and you get really high, and then over time it becomes less and less and less because your body's starting to adapt, things are changing.
Interesting. Okay.
And then people start chasing that high, and so it's very common. Like, people are like, I just want to show up and blast off.
Wow.
And that's great, but like, maybe there's a reason why you want to do that. Well, let's look at that for a moment, so trust me, I love to send it and just go go to outer space or whatever, but that's not my primary goal for everyone. And certainly the more that I've learned, like, taking people there maybe is not the first place I'm going, which I used to. I was like, all right, we're going, boom, let's get out of here, let's do it. But now it's a little bit more trying to understand someone and where they're at.
Like practical tips or practical strategy for their like daily lives. It's like, for instance, like for me, I'm into certain, like I'm into trading, which could be a very high stress, situation. And, maybe for other people, like, surfers that are in these situations with big wave surfers, it's like, that's a whole different ball game, and
training different things as well, like you big wave surfer, you're training lung capacity, you're training carbon dioxide tolerance, you're training, a lot of more in the mindset type of things, where like, okay, how do I put myself under high extreme stress and still be able to like maintain, so there are a lot of different strategies in where you can take people.
Yeah, I'm curious. So you're a father of two, right? So how do you? Well, let me think about how I want to phrase the question. As a child, growing up, we spoke on it. Nobody teaches you how to breathe, right? Nobody. So that's why there's so many of us out here as adults that are using our bodies incorrectly or not understanding what we're feeling. How do you teach your kids about breath work?
That's the ultimate challenge. Lead by example. That's all you can do. Your kids are watching every move that you make and listening to every word that you say, and most of it is when you're not aware of it. And I've tried to get my kids to do breath work. They're just not. It's coming from dad, if it was coming from someone else, maybe there's a little bit more receptivity to it. But just I've been surrounding them with it for a long time. I'll point out little things here and there to them, but any sort of like, hey, let's sit down and do this, and like adding any bit of force to it, it's just the resistance. So, I think part of it is just like leading by example, and I'm human too, and I have my ebbs and flows with my practice and also with how I'm reacting and responding. When my practice is good, totally. my ability to kind of like deal with some of the frustrations of being a dad are a lot less. When my practice is not as strong, more heightened reactivity. The cool thing is that they have both parents. So my wife she's not necessarily like a focused breathwork practitioner, but she has the skill set and knowledge. And so we're both kind of like trying to just like have it there around without having to go into it. I mean, trust me, I wish my kids were like, Dad, I'm having a really hard time with this. How do I deal with that? Like my oldest, she's 11, just about to be 12, and she's in competitive gymnastics. And I'm like, God, you could really utilize some of this to take it to the next level. But she's not asking for it. So I'm kind of also like not forcing it. But I do see moments where it comes into play, and proud moments where I'm like, oh, I see you. I see what you're doing over there. Which, it's hard not to get bummed about that, because I have friends or particularly other teachers who have trained under me that their kids are like super dialed in on it. I'm like, gosh, you're killing it. What am I doing wrong?
Right.
But it's all just slow trickle.
I wonder what the difference is there for, you were mentioning like these other kids that are taking it seriously or whatever, and or like at least practicing it, right? And when I was a kid, the way I kind of relate to it is that I was always told to stretch. I can run. I don't need to stretch. Like, I'm fine. I feel good right now. But then as I get older, I'm like, man, I should have been stretching. Like, I should have kept stretching. Like, even though I didn't feel it at the time, like, to know that it would provide longevity, to be able to be more athletic as you get older. And having this realization now where it's like breath work is important, how do we bridge the gap for the younger generation to like emotionally feel that it's important? You know what I mean?
I think it's finding positive influences that connect. It's funny that as you were saying that, I was thinking about one of the breath guides on my platform, and she's been in she did our teacher training, and she's a big part of what we're doing now. Her kids are both like, they're pretty dialed in on the breathing, but they also had an influence of like her mom waking up every day and doing breath work, and then having someone else teaching it rather than her. So like our platform is such that we have morning breathe, 6 a.m., 15 minutes, guided by one of our facilitators. It's online. And so she was waking up and doing that, and her kids were there with her watching. So she had the influences of myself and Luke and these other facilitators that they were just like picking up through osmosis. And then there would be some curiosity, and she would have the opportunity to like sort of explain more to them there. And then, so I think just having like positive influences.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it more in like pop culture and stuff, breathwork. And so hopefully there will be someone that my kids connect to that they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like Taylor Swift is into breathwork. Like, tell me more, Dad.
Right,
you know, like if only, right? Come on, Taylor, where are you at?
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I think that's
Taylor
definitely I think that's definitely you gotta find that like influence that can help sort of
as they get older it'll click. I think it'll click for sure. I mean, it's such a beautiful practice, a practical thing that everybody does. You said it yourself.
Yeah.
We're all breathing, and to master that in your own body is super important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all breathing on one sense, and we're all like trying to navigate this life, and our breath is essentially what's keeping us alive, right? We can not eat for days and drink for days, but we can only not breathe for a matter of minutes. And something that is so inherently vital, essential to us being alive, like there has to be something to that, right? Like that we're missing. And so now we're starting to figure that out. And I think that alone, like, I try to always tell people that, like, we have to breathe, and because it's so important, there needs to be some sort of magic underneath it that we can then understand and then utilize it to be able to survive. You know, not survive in a sense of like just being alive, but like survive to the great higher potential,
like thrive,
thrive and survive and reach our potential.
Yeah,
because it is directly connected to that. I mean, I've seen it for myself where started doing these practices, and then like all these things that I was able to do that I was like, oh, there's no way, you know, and then boom, it happens, and then it opens you up even more to go for the next thing.
So would you say the quality of your breath can put, you know, the quality of your breath is going to give you so let me rephrase this. The quality of your breath is giving you the quality of your life, I guess.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I would say your quality of your breath could be directly correlated to the quality of your life. Totally. Yeah, I think that there's a lot to that.
You think through breath work that you could like, I don't know, it's running on your autonomic nervous system, right? So basically it's just automatically, you're not thinking about it. So each day we just breathe and we don't necessarily think about it. But if we have a practice, do you think eventually that system corrects itself, and so that you maybe, even though you're not doing breathwork practice anymore, that you are automatically sort of tuned in, you know what I mean?
That's what practice is, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's the point of it, right?
Yeah.
Number one, it's okay, like, let's understand where those dysfunctions are, and then we practice with proper mechanics and better, you know, functionality, so that we do it consciously, because that is one of the key parts of our breath that makes it so powerful, is we can put our mind on it and do it. And then so we're practicing it consciously, intentionally, in the right way, and then we step away and we're not thinking about it, and those new patterns are built in, so that then when we're unconscious and that autonomic nervous system is driving our breath without us thinking about it, we're inherently doing it better.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So it's just like any practice, right? We just, you know, it's the same as like shooting hoops a million times, right? Until it's like muscle memory. Same thing.
But it's like such an important thing, and we just kind of overlook it, you know, just because it just happens automatically.
Exactly.
So it's like we're not at the basketball court shooting hoops. Like we're just living our life.
Yeah, we're just living and breathing. Yeah.
And it's like, and I find even with the short breath work, you know, before I was feeling a little excited, a little nervous, and just calming myself down to be able to just you know, flow into the you know, podcast. It's just it changes just a few minutes, you know.
Yeah, and I think a key to that too is just meeting yourself where you are too. Like, right, when we started, it was like, okay, you're saying, oh, I'm a little anxious. Okay, cool, let's meet that right where it is. First, we started nice and slow, obviously checking in to like feel where we're at, like noticing yourself in space and inside of your body, and then we started breathing a little bit faster. Like the accelerated breath, meet yourself where you were. That's how you were already breathing. I was watching you, you know, your breath was up here, a lot of tension in your chest. So like, cool, let's do that. And then we start to slow it down. And then we start to take more control over it, lengthen it out, so that then you're not trying to go from A to Z with, you know, skipping all the way down. It's like, no, we got to go to B, then we go to C, then D, then E, work our way down the ladder or up the ladder. You know, it's like all of a sudden you're feeling like a certain way, and you just like start really ramping it up really fast. You're gonna like get dizzy and like feel overwhelmed, you know. So it's like just work your way up. You gotta first start where you're at.
Yeah. Start simple. And then there's like this other side where, you know, you have cold exposure, like the Wim Hof. It seems extreme, you know, like you're going to these freezing cold waters, or even a story my dad told me about monks that have like used a breathwork practice. They throw like cold blankets over themselves, like basically bare naked, and just breathing until the blankets like steam off, like they, you know. So it's like, what can someone do? I mean, because obviously those are like extreme, but like how does like the cold exposure sort of tie into the breath work, you know?
Yeah, the cold is also like another stressor, a hormetic stressor, you know. So acute stress that allows us to, number one, see how we respond to stress, because you get in a cold body of water, your stress response is immediately going to take over, so you can see what's happening. Like you get to observe a little bit of like, oh, okay, these are my tendencies of, am I like sit here and like grind it out and try to fight it out, or is it like flee, like flight, you know, or whatever. Like your mental chatter starts to come in, and you know, what are you telling yourself when you're in moments of stress? Like all that gets right in your face. It's like a mirror. It's just like boom right here. And then obviously then you have this opportunity to then inject yourself into the process, where you can consciously start to slow yourself down or start to calm yourself down. So it gives you this opportunity to have the stress come in, to watch and observe, and then also to like intervene and start to understand how you settle when you're in moments of stress. So to me, like the cold, more and more that I like experience it, it's yes, physiologically there's a lot of things that are happening, a lot of benefits, cardiovascular, immune system, all those things. But like for me, it's so much of it is about the mental side of things, because it is such an like extreme input, or like extreme stress source. So it really gives you this opportunity to like see how you're responding. Like even before, like when my mind goes to like, oh, I should take an ice bath today, and then like the downstream pattern of my thoughts and like the excuses that I come up with, and how I'll do it later or whatever, like all of that starts to come to the surface. And so it's like really this cool opportunity to see like, okay, cool, like acknowledge, I don't want to do it, but then I'm going to do it anyway. And then when you get in, you go through that whole process, which is uncomfortable. And then when you get out, I've never done an ice bath where I'm like, damn, I shouldn't have done that. I get out and I'm like, so glad I did that. That was awesome. You know, but a lot of times it's the challenge of like actually just going and doing it.
The mental aspect is definitely interesting to me as well. Everything that you described, I feel like there's probably a lot, at least the people that have tried, you know, on a consistent basis using like an ice bath or cold exposure or whatever, is having those moments where you're like, no, I don't want to do that. Like that sounds terrible today. It's kind of cold out. Like, you know, and then you go, you know what? I need this. I need to do it. And then, like you said, it's like I've never felt like I shouldn't have done that. You know?
It's so funny, like how quickly we forget, right? It's like same as like a woman having a child, right? Like they go through this whole process, like it's gnarly, and then for some reason you forget, and then you have another kid, you know, and then you have another kid. It's like we quickly forget what the pain is, or you know what that's like, and I guess that's to our advantage, right? And keep us going. But yeah, the cold is an interesting, another interesting practice. Sauna too, heat, you know, a little bit different. All these ways in which we can self-induce stress to, again, create more capacity, more resiliency, also to understand ourselves a little bit more. I think we've gotten pretty soft as human beings. You know, we have temperature controlled rooms, we have food on demand, we've got, you know, information on demand, and that forces us to like be a little bit more sedentary, not have to push our bodies in the way that they're designed. Like, we thrive on stress, but like good stress, not the stress of like social media and keeping up with the Joneses and all of that stuff, right? Like, we historically, if you look, like, we were outside, we were moving a lot, like we had to hunt for our food, we would go long stretches without food, you know, all of these things. So it's like all these practices that are now coming back into play, it's like, or it was in a modern way of like bringing us back, because let's face it, like, this modern world that we live in, it's only going to get more and more. We're seeing it, right? Like, just with all the things that are happening, AI and whatever it is, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, as like kind of trendy as it may seem, it's like we're all just trying to figure out how we can live more to our potential and also be able to like handle this modern world, because our nervous system is ancient. It's not designed for life in 2024. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we understand that, and then how do we kind of implement strategies and different interventions to be able to like handle it?
It seems like where we are as a society here in America, at least, people are more open to it. Like you said, breathwork is where yoga was 20 years ago. People are looking into fasting. People are looking into all these ancient practices that kind of bring us back to where we were. You know, food on demand is insane, right? Like, eat whenever your mind thinks you're hungry, and that creates weakness in some ways. So it's cool that you mentioned that, because I think that's going to be part of my journey, and maybe our journey together, is figuring out, you know, where the resistance lies, our limits, that's what I really want this project to be, is figuring out how to be the best version of myself, and and I want to create my own standards for living, not live by someone else's, right? And taking control back in the breath is like such a beautiful place to start, I think. I'm excited. I'm really excited to explore it more.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, it's sort of an endless rabbit hole. Once you kind of like peek your head in, you're like, oh, okay, we can go really deep into this. And there's so many different ways in which we can, you know, move and grow. And so, yeah, it's like, just, you gotta kind of keep following the curiosity. I mean, that's one thing that I'm always preaching, is like, just stay curious, you know, and like keep learning. Like, the more you figure out that you actually don't know, the better off you are. Because we don't know shit. That's the reality, you know. And so,
what's one of your newest curiosities right now?
That's a good question. Honestly, one of like my newest things that I've been really into has just been like more like resistance training. I've never been someone to go to the gym. Surfing has always been like my one thing that I've like done active wise consistently for my whole life. You know, even when I was doing sports, I was never in the gym lifting weights or doing anything like that. So that's been a big shift in my kind of just overall like practices that I'm doing over the last like 8 or 9 months. Been super into it, put on like a lot of muscle that I feel good and strong in my body. And I know, like, I mean, I'm 42, and as I get older, like the rapid decline of muscle mass, it just happens really fast. So now I'm like, okay, I need to like be doing that more. So whether it's like going to the gym and like lifting weights, or like rucking, I've been super into rucking. So like throw on the backpack with 20, 30 pounds in it and just go walk and hike. And it's also a great way for me to like really hone my breath. I love that. Just like also gets me outside in nature. So those have been two really kind of I guess just like the resistance training in general has been a really big kind of awakening for me as far as physical body. I never really got injured until literally I turned 40, and like 2 weeks later I injured my knee. I sprained my MCL. I was like, I broke my wrist when I was 15, but other than that, I've had no injury.
What happened?
That was like a wake up surfing.
Surfing?
Yeah,
oh wow, okay.
Just like foot got caught on my board, and the board was shot out, and my knee just went. And that was a big wake up call. It was like, oh, you're 40 now. Like, who do you think you are?
Oh no.
So that kind of like got me more into like, okay, gotta move my body, stretch my body, all these things, like again, another form of stress, right? Acute stress, that's the key.
Yeah.
You know, acute stress on the body creates strength, resiliency. You know, we grow with that, and then we also need strategies to handle the chronic stress so that we don't fall into those chronic stress loops, because that's where the damage is done. So yeah, and my curiosity is always around breathing. I'm always trying to figure out like, okay, what else is there here, you know? And it's a little bit hard, and you gotta read obviously scientific journals and papers, and those get a little bit overwhelming. Understanding where to go, like what sources to look at for just expanded knowledge, you know. I wish I kind of had more of like a think tank group where there was people that were like really high level that I had access to. I mean, there are those people, and you know, they're out there, but I think pushing myself to kind of like be in that realm a little bit more.
Right.
But yeah, always looking at how I can be a better facilitator, be better with the breath.
Yeah.
And I think it's always just starts here. Like, I got to practice more myself, really embody it. Which again, as I said, it like ebbs and flows, you know. But it's like once we can feel it for ourselves, then we can actually communicate it to someone else. So that's a big thing I got to keep reminding myself, especially as I'm like working with top level athletes and other, you know, high performers. That becomes even more important, at least in my eyes.
Okay. How's your breathwork practice like evolved after work, or like studying with, you know, Dan Brule, you know, Brian McKenzie, like these different people, like how is it?
Yeah, my practice was really like a lot of hyperventilation practice, you know, Wim Hof breathing.
Interesting. Okay.
In the beginning, and now it's shifted to a little bit more like subtle, more nuanced focus on mechanics, focus on slowing things down.
Okay.
Not as like, you know, high powered, you know, just like getting high. It's way more on the subtleties of it.
Okay.
And trying to understand that for myself, because I think that, in my opinion, that's what I think most people need. Okay. You know, it's like I'm kind of like seeing like, okay, yeah, these hyperventilation tactics are great, but not at the rate and level that I was doing them at or teaching them at. And so to me, it's like that's like kind of like the deep cleaning, right? Like go to the dentist, you get the deep cleaning, and then these like other kind of more nuanced mechanical practices and other kind of ways of approaching it, that's more like the daily brushing and flossing of your teeth, which is kind of how we communicate what our daily breathes are on our platform. Yeah. They're 15 minutes. Most of them are, well, they vary, but it's not, you're never really going to do something that like totally sends you into some like, you know,
psychedelic
yeah
like realm,
or
which
just
I've heard
like
can
a
happen
deep
with,
like emotional release. Maybe people do have emotional releases in a short practice, and it happens, but that's not necessarily the purpose of it. You know, it's like we're more here like fine tuning and getting to understand ourselves and that connection to breath a little bit more.
Yeah.
For some,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that's probably gonna reach more people, just because I think that's what a majority of us need, is that daily brush and floss. Yeah, and I think the unfortunate and challenging part is that like the deep like hyperventilation type practices, big emotional releases, all of those are what you see on social media, and that's what gets all the hype, you know. And everyone's like, I want to go and like, you know, have this crazy experience. And to me, again, yes, it's good, but like,
who's leading that, and what is their intention, and how are they holding that space, and what's the integration like afterwards. Like the breath work world is still very Wild West. You know, there's not really a governing body. There's not like any sort of like guiding principles. You can go and take a breathwork facilitator course in a weekend online with no in-person practical experience, and then call yourself a breathworker.
Right.
Or you could go and take something that is like 6 months or a year long, where you're actually like stretching it out and getting practical experience. So there's no like regulation of that. Like anyone could call themselves a breathworker. Just go on Instagram and search breathwork, and you'll see a 1,000,001 people, and it's obviously very trending right now, for good reason. But yeah, it's still a little bit of that Wild West. So that's been another kind of goal. Is just like maintaining really high standards for the facilitators that we're training, and then also obviously for myself, like learning how, like all these different aspects of not just like breathing, but like how do you hold space, how do you help people in all these different realms that are connected to our breath, or that may come up through breath. So yeah, it's interesting phenomenon of how it's just like so interwoven in all these things.
Yeah, you mentioned, integration and how that looks afterwards. Well, how does the integration look after for when you're facilitating?
It's a little bit different based on what I'm doing. For like a group, I used to lead a group class, and it was an hour long, but I would mix in, some mechanical things, and then we would just be like more like a connected breathe. So part of that was like remembering that minimum effective dose. Like I'm not like pushing people super hard. I would say to people, like, if you want more, you can go here, but that's up to you.
Sure.
And the group is going to be held in this kind of level, and if you want more, it's available for you there.
Sure.
So that was part of it, was like keeping it contained.
Got it.
And then afterwards, because it was like a public class, and I wasn't connected to every single person that was showing up, I would always have a sharing circle at the end. So at least people can share their experience and get me to like reflect back to them, or to help them figure something out, or maybe not necessarily figure something out, but at least just someone there listening and hearing them and seeing them. And then also over time, part of my personal like approach to breath is like, if I'm doing some cyclical hyperventilation or taking someone into a place where they're getting dysregulated, particularly their chemistry, to at least bring them back to their baseline through certain tactics, so that I'm not leaving them like in a totally different like physiology than when they came in. So that's part of my personal integration process that people are not aware of. And then as far as like working individual with clients, like part of the integration of the work that we do in a session is then them going and doing the homework and reflecting and journaling about it. So yeah, it's a little bit different. And I think that is a not appreciated, but like an overlooked aspect of all of this is like integration, and how do you really do that in a highly effective way.
The intention behind what the breath work is working through the person, I guess, right? Like,
and you never know.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, literally I could have someone laying on the ground during a session, and it looks like they're not even connected to what I'm saying, or like they're barely even breathing. And then afterwards they'll come up to me and be like, oh my God, like I had this experience where whatever happened. And I'm like, watching you, I would have had no inclination that you were anywhere near that place.
Right.
So that's the other thing, is you just like, you don't know, and so you really have to like get yourself out of your way and just hold that container and hold that space. So yeah,
it could be scary. Like you said, it's the Wild West, and there's a lot of people who may use this as an opportunity to monetize it and take advantage of people in vulnerable spaces, and it's that can be scary. So like finding someone you trust and someone with the right intention is super important. Right?
Very important.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it. Nailed it on
Yeah.
the head right there. Because there's someone for everyone.
Yeah.
And you know, that's kind of the way I choose to look at it. Is like, yeah, there's a million breathwork facilitators now, and great.
Right.
Like that's just helping to expand the awareness of this, and you know, someone's going to resonate with this person, someone's going to resonate with that
Right.
person, someone's going to resonate with me, and as long as they're getting this knowledge and this experience, like, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
That's awesome. And you said there's so many different styles and styles of breath work.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
everyone's like branding their own, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
What's yours?
Our Breath Collective. I don't have
Yeah.
principle-based, human-centric approach. You know,
Cool.
not like this is not a methodology.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the Wim Hof method, or it's not
Right.
like Buteyko or rebirthing, or you know, like they have all these
Right.
names, which is basically to allow your thing to proliferate and for people to grab a hold of
Sure.
it. But yeah, no specific methodology or name of our style of breathwork.
Just do what feels good to you. Just follow that feeling, huh?
Yeah.
If there's like people out there listening, they're like, I don't have any time for breath work. You know, we were talking about it's like 5 minutes. So what are some steps like someone that has 5 minutes they could take to?
I mean, again, like just coming back, it just starts with awareness. So like just in moments of stress, I mean, as hard as it may be, it's like just bring it back to like paying attention to your breath, or even like set a timer, you know, and like
Okay.
every hour on the hour your timer goes off, and it's like, oh, breath check in, and it's just
I like that.
bringing attention, you know,
Yeah.
and then you just start. The more you come back, the more it will happen naturally, you know, and you get in these moments where you're just like, oh yeah, check in real quick. Okay, cool. So, and sometimes it's like, you could even just be one breath, you know, it's like you're just creating a little bit of space, a little pause, that sacred pause, just one breath can just create enough space to just reset or to become aware.
Yeah.
And then from there, yeah, I think it's just starting to move the breath and see what happens, and start to understand, okay, if I do this, it's going to do this, and if I do this, it's going to do this. And so you start to just kind of build that like experiential aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you could study breath science and respiratory science till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
But it's like until you actually experience it, then you don't really know
Right.
what that necessarily means.
Right.
You know, so
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, people always ask, yeah, how do I start? It's like, well, just start by changing the pattern in which you're breathing. Change the pathway. That's an easy one. Breathe
the
in and out
pathway.
through your nose. Then breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Then breathe in through your mouth and out through your mouth. Then breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose. That's what we did in the very beginning of what we did.
That's
right?
interesting to think about because I've seen like, you know, through the social media and stuff, it's like the difference between nasal breathing and a mouth breathing, and what's the difference there? Like, what's the
Well, there's a lot of
what's
differences.
what's the
The
impact
short
Yeah,
answer
sure.
is that our nose is made for breathing and our mouth is made for eating and talking. So moving throughout your day, you should primarily be breathing through your nose. We have filtration, it's conditioning the air, it's activating our primary breathing musculature, it's slowing the breath down. You know, it's the greatest filtration system that's been ever designed. There's no man-made filtration system that's as good as the one that we have built into our nose. Our mouth is available for us when we need it. And so I think that's one tricky thing is like certain methodologies of breathing, they're like, never breathe through your mouth. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. When we do it intentionally and for a specific reason, then yes, there is a time and a place to breathe through your mouth. There's also times where your nose is plugged and you can't breathe through your nose, you know, so you have to breathe through your mouth. But, you know, it's also like under higher metabolic demand. So like we start exercising, we get to a certain threshold, and then we have to change to mouth breathing. And part of like breath practice is like building that threshold of where you can maintain nasal breathing higher and higher, because that's going to keep you in a more aerobic state, you know?
Right.
So your endurance is going to be longer. It's like, think about nasal breathing as aerobic, which is like putting logs on the fire, slow burn. Mouth breathing is anaerobic, It's like the lighter fluid on the fire.
Oh, wow.
Short burst
Okay.
of energy, but burns out really quickly. So we need long sustained energy all the time. And so nasal breathing being the primary pathway that we should be maintaining.
Are we potentially hurting ourselves if we are unaware of just like mouth breathing, like in like intense sports or so? I don't know, like.
Yeah, so when we start to mouth breathe, we start to recruit auxiliary musculature. So the breath tends to move up in the chest. We start chest breathing. We start using our shoulders and our neck, and you know, all that's using energy, right? Also, the gas exchange in our lungs is happening like the majority of that is in the lower part of our lungs. So once we start moving our breath up here, that gas exchange is not as efficient. So, you know, the nasal breathing is going to allow the breath to move down, really activate that diaphragm, lower part of the lung. There's also some interesting findings around mouth breathing and how that changes the shape of our face as well as our mouth and our teeth. So when your mouth is closed, your tongue is generally resting on the roof of your mouth, proper tongue position, tongue posture, resting on the roof of your mouth. So it's actually creating natural palate expansion. So keeping the airway open and also maintaining proper facial structure. When you start habitually breathing through your mouth,
Interesting.
Your tongue is not resting on the roof of your mouth. Teeth start to get crooked. Jaw shape starts to change, so our actual chin starts to move back, starts blocking the airway. And it's almost like you can see these like images of people that have like chronically mouth breathed over time. And it's almost like it's like a wax figure holding their face in front of a heat lamp. It starts to like kind of move back and melt back. So there's that too, like actual physical changes that happen. And you know, as human beings, as we've evolved over time, what's happened is our brain has gotten bigger, which has then changed the lower part of our skull and our jaw line, and which has then impacted our airway. So our airway has actually gotten reduced over time as we've evolved into, you know, Homo sapiens. So we're actually like considered probably the worst breathers in the animal kingdom. You know, you watch animals, like watch a cheetah going full sprint. He's never breathing through his mouth. It's always in through his nose. And even when it recovers.
Right.
It's interesting you mentioned the animal kingdom, and I remember seeing a chart somewhere when I was younger about the length of an animal's breath correlating to the age of, like, how long it can live. So like a blue whale, right, can hold its breath for hours, something like that, something like crazy like that. And I look at I have 2 dogs. I look at my dogs, and when they're breathing fast, I get worried. I always think, oh man, like they're wasting their life force almost. Like they're breathing so fast. Like
we only have so many breaths in our lifetime.
Is that true? Is that like something to think about?
Lung capacity has a direct correlation to longevity. So we have a greater lung capacity, potentially going to live longer.
Right.
Which, as you said, like a blue whale obviously has massive lung capacity, lives a really long time. I never even really like kind of went back to the animal kingdom on that, but more just like as humans, like training to build our lung capacity. It's interesting. There's a lot we can learn from nature. You know, it has all the answers, and we just like don't really pay enough attention to it. So
if in general someone wants to, like, if they're just vain and they just want to live longer, they're like, well, breathwork could actually be part of that, you know?
Totally.
Like,
build that lung capacity.
You know?
Totally.
For sure.
And it's interesting. I mean, we talked about how there's a direct correlation between the quality of your breath and the quality of your life. So if you're having short, you know, unintentional breaths, you can maybe bring about sickness into your body, right? If you're not breathing correctly, it's actually going to have the opposite effect of disease and all these negative things, you know, that can happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could break the word disease into dis-ease, right? So like if we're breathing fast, the ease is not there, like in our system.
Dis-ease.
We're dysregulated, we're ramped up, or whatever, you know? So,
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe that just kind of came to mind as you were saying that.
During, I mean, obviously a touchy subject for some people, but during like the pandemic, COVID, how did that sort of play a role with what was going on with you and maybe those around you? Because that's such a so around like the lungs, you know, COVID. It's like people are getting sick. Their breathing is off or whatever. So how did that sort of what you were doing, you know, affect the people around you? Because I'm sure that you were, you know, feeling passionate about it, especially at that time.
It was a really crazy potent time. Like, so we had started Our Breath Collective in September 2019. And so pre-pandemic, it was an online-based business, and then the pandemic hit, and everything went online, and we were kind of already there, positioned, particularly in this breath space. Obviously, respiratory virus, breathing became a big topic.
Sure.
There was also a book that came out. It's called Breath: The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor.
Okay.
Instant New York Times bestseller, came out in May maybe of 2020.
Yeah.
So it was like the perfect storm for breathwork to like really take off. And we saw it happen then.
Right.
It was like boom, that like it got put on the map.
Right.
And the book was a big part of that too, I believe anyway.
Yeah.
And then just people becoming more aware of the importance of respiratory health. And so it was a big catalyst, and it's obviously continued from there. Interesting time.
Because I saw a video with Wim Hof, and it was him basically, I think he was injecting some sort of like a virus or something, and through his breath work, he was able to, and he had other students
something with the
that was like the primary study that was done on him. So he injected an endotoxin, basically.
Okay.
E. coli, which he's simulating like food sickness, right? Or food poisoning. Vomiting, diarrhea, headache, fever, all of those things.
Right.
And he got injected with it, basically fought it off in 15 minutes through doing breath work. And the doctors were like, oh yeah, you're an anomaly. He was like, no, I can teach anyone to do this. So he took a bunch of people, taught them the breath work and cold exposure and all that, then brought him back, and I think there was 12 participants that were selected, and then obviously the control group, everyone in the control group got super sick, and then Wim's group, all of them within like 2 hours basically were just gone. So
that's
that was like what put him on the map. So obviously breathing can impacts our immune system, and
I just think about, you know, for someone, you know, day to day, like a mom, he has kids. I can't get sick. I have to take care of my kids. I have to go to work. Like, you know, so it's something like this could potentially be something that you could learn to fight if you're starting to feel something off. You know, maybe you use this tool to, you know, sort of steer that away instead of just, you know, the general like, you know, here's this pill, or you know, like you know what I mean, like.
I think that it's all. All the things kind of come together in that way. You know, it's like, if you have a practice and you're breathing more efficiently and you're using proper mechanics and doing all the things right, like your body is more aligned to how it's supposed to be operating. Then you add something in like cold exposure or heat, and those are going to help even more, right? So it's all just like kind of getting your body in better, more like optimized to how it's supposed to actually operate.
Cool. And I remember we sort of worked together on, I think you said it was Peter Litchfield, right? You were studying under him, and so you were using certain tools, right? Like actual machines that were providing like that biofeedback data. How is that playing a role in sort of your journey right now, like with your clients? And
so I got certified as a breathing behavior analyst with Peter, and basically what that is doing is it's looking at real-time carbon dioxide levels, and so basically our CO2 has like a baseline threshold that it should be at all the time, and then based on dysfunctional habits that we've gotten over time, that baseline shifts typically down. so that we actually start over breathing, meaning we're breathing more than we should, and that CO2 level goes down, and then that has a ton of downstream effects on different parts of our physiology. And so that work in particular is starting to uncover and look at where the dysfunction is and what led to that. So just like any, like breathing is a behavior, and just like any other behavior, it is susceptible to being changed over time based on experiences that we have in life. And so, there's motivations and reinforcements that keep a certain behavior going because maybe it protected us or kept us safe in an instance where we were unsafe.
Yeah.
And so that then becomes ingrained in us, and then we don't actually understand the impact that may be having. So we utilize a capnometer. So that's measuring CO2. So then you bring people into different sort of experiences or states, or through sort of like an interview process, trying to figure out, okay, where did these things happen, what is the behavior that's happening, what are the motivations and reinforcements behind it, and then starting to work back to create a new behavior and build a more functional behavior into it. So it's trippy, right?
That's really awesome. That's a whole nother level I didn't even know you can get to. Aside from just like practicing breathing, you're addressing like traumas and reprogramming your body and mind, and I'm sure the participants or the patients, I don't know what you would call them. What do you call them?
Like not people, really patients, but more like clients.
Clients can see the results and connect that to their, like that mind-body connection can happen, right? And is that what's really helping to ingrain and solidify the patterns and the
part of it, part of it is that, and then a lot of it is beginning to uncover where we actually take control of the breath. So naturally our body is always striving for homeostasis, and it's going to, the breath, like your body knows what to do. So it's part of it is like allowing yourself to get back to letting the body do its thing. And we, through certain life experiences and things that have happened to us, we inherently start controlling our breath unconsciously, which then creates the dysregulation. So it's starting to figure out where we do that, and then getting back to allowing the breath in those instances. So part of the work is we do different interventions and different things so that then you can start to feel in your body the different symptoms or the different sensations that start to happen when that CO2 level starts to change. So then you become a little bit more aware, and you can then implement strategies to recover. And then also it's to reprogram as well underneath that. So it's kind of like it's even more of like a puzzle process with that, I mean, I don't even think we made it all the way through to the end, but it takes a long time, and for people that's like it's hard, like we want the instant. And I mean, that is the one thing that's nice about the biofeedback, is that you actually can see what's happening, so you can see the levels changing, and so that's helpful. But it's a really powerful process that I wish I was doing more with people. I just, like, my kind of like path has not led me down to working a lot of one-on-one with people.
Right.
Kind of been focused more on that business, and then doing some other things that have kept me away from just like the individualized work. But I see that there's a lot of potential for that to kind of come into play as I'm like starting to build these other things that I'm doing.
The machines, if people are curious and they want to, you said it's capnometer, like they can essentially get these tools, and if they're interested, they can connect to it and kind of find out.
Most
for
people,
themselves,
most people are not going to go buy a calorimeter because it's pretty expensive.
Okay, that is
but
okay.
you would have to find like
Okay.
a practitioner to kind of help you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's other tools that you can get that.
I just know for myself, like, even though we had like maybe 3 sessions or whatever, just seeing that on a screen and seeing like, oh, your CO2 levels here, like, and I remember in the beginning, you were looking at it like, is the machine like not working properly? Because it was like really high at first, and you're like, this doesn't seem right, like, and I was just breathing like normally, and then it was like, okay, let me go into like a specific type of breathing, and it kind of like threw it off for a second, and it's like, maybe you're trying too hard, like maybe my autonomic nervous system at that time was actually working very well or something. I don't know. Like, it was just interesting to see it, firsthand, because I'm interested in biofeedback and like different realms and stuff like that. It's like beneficial, I feel like, to see, because some people are like, I need to see it to believe it, and that's like a proof right there. You're like watching it. It's like and it's like, okay, now that I see it, I actually do believe in it, and that belief alone can make you want to do breath work.
Well, and the biofeedback allows you to align to the actual like feeling that you have in that particular state. So it's like you can see the biofeedback, then feel into your body, okay, this is what it feels like when I'm in resonance or whatever, and so then you know what it feels like when you're there. Then you can also go in the opposite direction where you're in a dysregulated state and you start to feel sensations that come up, and then okay, I'm here, I need to come back here. Like Peter always talks about when he becomes hypocapnic, which means low CO2, which means over breathing, the first thing he notices is he gets like tightness in his temples.
Oh, interesting.
So he's like highly aware of that, and then he knows like, oh, okay, wow, I'm over breathing now, and whatever strategy he has to bring himself back, or to start allowing the breath. So that's I think where biofeedback really comes into play. I've had an Aura ring for a long time, and it's easy to get like really sucked into like waking up in the morning and checking the data, and like for a long time I was always like, okay, I'm gonna wake up and like just focus on my body and feel into like how I actually feel when I wake up, because we don't have like outside things, we haven't eaten, we haven't moved or anything, and so it's a really good time to check in. And then I would go and look at the data and see if I could start to build correlations between how I felt and where my thing was saying I was. So I could wake up in the morning and pretty much guess like within 2 or 3 points of like what my sleep score or recovery score was. So I think that's kind of really where biofeedback comes into play. It's like we get really attached to the data and how is it actually helping us, right?
Yeah, no,
That's,
100%.
Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you hopping on the podcast with us. Did you have any other questions?
I mean,
I'm sure there's tons of questions.
So if I wanted to, 15 minutes a day, you said you have a platform I can join. Is it for everyone? Is it a certain amount of people every month, or?
It's an open membership platform. We have about 200 members or so.
Cool.
And we have, I think there's about 12 or 13 different facilitators, so everyone kind of rotates.
Nice.
There's a session every weekday, Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific time, and then every Tuesday and Thursday there's a 6 p.m. as well. They're all 15 minutes. They're all kind of like very different because each instructor has their own like style and perspective and way that they're facilitating. So every day is going to be different. There's no 2 days that are the same. Anyone can join. There's not really like it's just like get in there and start breathing. And that was really the impetus for it all was as I started teaching workshops and getting out there and really just bringing the Wim Hof method in particular out in the world, people were like, okay, this is great, but like how do I build a practice? And there wasn't really much out there at the time. Like, you could go on YouTube and find some random videos, but you didn't really know what you were getting. You could maybe get like one of the apps that was like the breathing bubble, it showed the bubble grows and the bubble. It just didn't have any humanness to it. So a couple of friends and I were like, all right, well, we're already waking up and doing our practice. Let's just broadcast it, let's just put it out there. So then that's how we started, was like, hey, we're not going to get into the why. We don't teach on the thing. We're not giving you any science. We're just straight up, we're going to wake up and we're going to breathe and we're going to see how you feel and do it for a long period of time and just see what happens. And then from there, people were like, okay, I've been doing this for like 3 months. Like, I want to know the why now. So then we started developing courses. We have a Breathwork intensive. It's a month-long intensive where we get into the science and then merge that with practice. And then from there, people are like, okay, this is great. I want to now teach this to my community or bring this to my workplace or whatever. So then we developed the teacher training. So that was kind of the progression. And that we've maintained that same philosophy for our daily breathes. It's like, just show up and breathe and don't worry about the why. We get so stuck in wanting to know what's happening. It's like, no, just come experience it and start noticing what's changing and how you feel. And then the days where you don't do it, what do you notice? So that's the idea. And also you're guided by another human. And we're basically like, come into our practice space. You're coming into my house. I'm setting up my computer. It's not like any sort of like professional, like Nike, whatever, like beautiful production. It's like, it's raw.
Right.
We're waking up maybe 30 minutes before and like put some water on your face and like, okay, I'm going to lead a breathe, and so it's just like, it's humans being humans and breathing together. And we've had people part of our community since day one that are still there now. And then obviously people come and go and people leave and then they come back. And so, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today, your insights, and maybe we can do a part 2 at some point in the future.
Totally.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, Reis.
You.
Appreciate you, brother.
Guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Reis.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet. Well, close your eyes.
All right.
A moment to drop into your body. Just kind of notice how you're feeling. Not making any judgments on any emotions that are there or whatever you're feeling in your body. And just take your mind away from your breath, away from doing anything other than just giving yourself a moment to just kind of feel your body on the chair, your legs, your back, feel your feet on the ground. And then just beginning to notice the movement of your breath. Notice where you feel the air moving in. Where's the first point of actual movement of your body happening? Where does that movement stop? And then feeling the flow in the opposite direction. And just taking a nice smooth breath in through your nose, pause at the top. Just hold it for a moment. Exhale out of your nose, let it go. Pick it right back up, breathe in through your nose. This time exhale out of your mouth. Pause at the bottom there. Breathe in through your mouth like you're pulling in through a straw. Exhale, pop the bubble. Pause at the bottom again. Relax your jaw, breathe into the back of your palate. Exhale out of your nose. And just let your breath go back to its natural rhythm. Just kind of notice what changed, if anything, 4 simple breaths. I'm just going to start in and out through the nose. I want you to bring your attention, your focus to your belly. So you should feel the movement down low. Keep the movement out of your chest and your shoulders in particular, and just feel your belly expand and then release through the exhale. So just in and out through your nose. And just kind of free flow it in your own time. There's not any particular cadence or rhythm, but just know that you're doing the breathing And just feeling the belly expand. Feel it release. Keeping your face, your jaw, your shoulders, your neck just soft and relaxed. It's a movement happening low. That's the focal point. And starting to pick up the rhythm. You can follow along with me. Just small breaths, not full. Just like a pump. It's almost like you're kind of stirring the pot now. So many of those nerves, that anxiety, whatever might be there, it's just kind of allowing it to loosen up a little bit. Five more. Slow it down a little. Even slower, two more. Last one, remove the sound so it's silent. And as you exhale, just let it fall back to neutral and then pause and hold your breath there. So no movement of breath. Exhale, hold. Just feeling the body, any sensations. Notice your heartbeat, maybe a little change in temperature, pressure in your head, whatever it might be. And we're going to inhale for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause and hold at the top. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause and hold at the bottom. 4. 2 more times. In for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold there. Last time. In 4. Pause. Exhale. 4, 3, 4. Hold. Going to keep the inhale for 4. Now we're going to hold at the top for 8. So in, 2, 3, 4. Hold a little longer. Or can you relax your body so you're not tense? And then exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 8 again. One more time. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold. Suspended here. Imagine you're like a cloud floating in the sky. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold there. And then just allow your breath to gently come back. Let it fall back into kind of its own natural, smooth rhythm. Just kind of feeling the subtle change from when you walked in the room to now. Recognizing that you just took conscious control of your breath, which allowed you to consciously control your nervous system a little bit more. Release tension, a little more grounded. When you're ready, you can just open your eyes. Back into the room.
It's nice.
Needed that.
Yeah, feels good.
Yeah. Thank you.
For sure.
Whew. Cool. I feel better. Yeah, no, I was a little bit nervous, getting...
Yeah, first podcast, nerves, shake it off.
Yeah.
Perfect guest to bring on for
Yeah.
this.